Okay, wonderful. All right. Okay, so welcome everyone. I hope that I'm audible. Welcome to the second research seminar organized by Research and Publications at IIM Ahmedabad. Today, I'm delighted to have Professor Fong Lim with us. And Professor Lim is an associate professor of operations management at the Lee Kong Chian School of Business at the Singapore Management University. Professor Lim's research has appeared in a number of prestigious academic journals, including Operations Research and Management Science, among others. Professor Lim's current research interests include e-commerce and marketplace analytics. He works on inventory management, warehousing and fulfillment, and sustainable urban logistics, among other interests that he has. So Professor Lim today is going to talk about, in fact, he's going to discuss a model for joint optimization of online retailers' anticipatory product replenishment and allocation to fulfillment centers, and the reactive fulfillment decisions, a joint modeling of that, with the objective of reducing or minimizing expected total operating costs. He's also going to talk about a test of the model using real data from an online fashion retailer, and he's going to discuss implications for the e-commerce industry in general. The talk is titled, as you can see, Integrating Anticipative Replenishment-Allocation with Reactive Fulfillment for Online Retailing Using Robust Optimization. This presentation is, apart from Zoom, this presentation is also being telecast live on YouTube, on IMA's YouTube channel. And so without further ado, Professor Lim, over to you. And what we had discussed is at about the 20-minute mark, we're going to take some audience questions. So participants, if you have any questions, feel free to write in the Q&A box, and we are going to take up those questions. Professor Lim is going to respond to those questions eventually. So Professor Lim, over to you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Sandeep, for a very clear and detailed introductions. You almost finished 50% of my talk. And thank you, Debjit, for inviting me. This is the first time that I conduct seminars online. So pardon with me if if there's any technical glitch or any things that I cannot control. So it might take a few seconds or even a few minutes to adjust. So let me start by basically talking about this project. This is a joint work with my postdoc, Song, and my colleague in SMU, Marcus. This paper is currently under revision for MSOM. So I'm actually revising it right now before the seminar, actually. So basically, we are, as you can see from the title, we are solving a problem for online retailing, for online retailer. And the key here is we are trying to make replenishment and allocation decision together with the fulfillment decisions and using robust optimizations. So the primary methodology that we use is robust optimizations. Okay. All right, so basically, why am I attracted to this problem and this area is because the e-commerce, just like India, the Google and Temasek holding. Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir. Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah,
all right. Okay, good. So you can see that the trend of the growth in e-commerce sales is very strong over the last decade, and it continued to grow. So primarily because lots of middle class are emerging in this area, and also because of the penetrations of internet as well as a 4G, 5G network, and also the mobile devices. So many of the citizens in, say, some rural area in Southeast Asia, they might not be able to, they might not they may not be able to afford to buy a desktop computer or laptop computer, but they can actually buy a handphone, with even less than $100. I know in India you can buy a phone, with $20, that kind of very affordable price. So because of this, the pervasiveness of these handheld devices, so a lot of people, they can actually buy stuff online. They can even sell things online nowadays using a handphone. So you can see many big company, for example, Alibaba just acquired the biggest e-commerce platform in Southeast Asia called Lazada. So Lazada is now part of Alibaba, and Amazon also came to this place. They start to set up a regional headquarter in Singapore. So interestingly, if you look at Amazon and Alibaba, these two giants, Alibaba, they basically don't invest heavily in US. On the other hand, Amazon couldn't quite, penetrate the Chinese market. So it turns out Southeast Asia is an area where these two e-commerce giants, they come head to head, they compete head to head in this region. So a lot of interesting things happen, a lot of deals, a lot of new acquisitions happen, and so on. So that is why I'm interested in working on this problem. So basically, I got inspired by this company. Basically, it's a German-based e-commerce website. They are selling, women's apparel as well as accessories in the Southeast Asia region. The company is owned by German. It's a German company, but they run their operation. They have the headquarters in Singapore, and their main business are primarily in Southeast Asia. So basically, they sell clothes. They sell different kind of fashion product clothes as well as accessories. And this is the map of Southeast Asia. In case you don't know what Southeast Asia, where Southeast Asia is. So basically, this is Singapore. It's a small island. And then beside you have Malaysia, Indonesia, Thailand, and so on. So basically, what if you are selling? So let me maybe start by asking a question. Suppose you are selling apparel, fashion products in Southeast Asia. Where do you think my supplier will be? Where should I source my inventory from if I'm selling my apparels in Southeast Asia? Anyone want to try? So my question is, suppose, I'm selling clothes, fashion product in Southeast Asia, and where is my supplier likely located? Or where should I source my inventory? Anyone want to try? Do you hear me?
Sir, the answers are coming in the chat window. You can use the chat window. Yeah, chat window, we are getting some answers.
I see. Okay. Okay. I don't know where chat
Yeah.
window
So
is.
this is Sandeep, Professor Lim. So people are saying Malaysia, Vietnam, Philippines, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, all sorts of countries.
I see. Sandeep, may I know how to open a chat window?
So if you hover your scroll, over the screen, you will see a chat button in the lower pane. If you bring down your yeah.
Chat. Okay, I see.
Yeah, yeah.
All right. Okay. So okay, let me see. I see India, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, Philippines, Vietnam, etc. Okay, all these are possible answers. Turns out this company, they actually source it from China in Guangzhou. So Guangzhou is basically located. This is where Guangzhou is located, somewhere here in this area. okay, not very far from Hong Kong. So I can tell you, basically, this is a picture that I took when I visited Guangzhou. You can see this is a textile, kind of a textile center, textile, complex. So, I encountered someone that brought me around and visit this big complex that sells all sort of components, all different kind of, you can think of these are like the shops that sell spare parts, for clothing. So even, we can see even for shops that sells lace, so they are selling the same kind of lace, exactly the same type of lace, and there's so many of them. There are a large number of them selling the same thing on the same level. So you can see the scale is a massive market. It's a massive production center. So for the company that I study with, basically they source their goods from Guangzhou. And then, so now you can see why they source it from Guangzhou, because Guangzhou has a very strong textile apparel industry. And so basically they ship their inventory, after they place the order, they ship their inventory to 3 warehouses, one located in Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia, and then one located in Jakarta, the other one located in Manila, which is a capital of Philippines. And the warehouse in Kuala Lumpur, basically they serve the Malaysian as well as the Singapore market. So if you are in Singapore, when you go to the website, when you place order, your good will be shipped from a Kuala Lumpur warehouse. And the warehouse in Jakarta, basically they are serving the Indonesian market. The entire Indonesia will be served by the warehouse in Jakarta. And then the warehouse in Manila, they are serving the Philippines market. And for the Kuala Lumpur warehouse, besides Malaysia and Singapore, they also serve the demand of Hong Kong and Taiwan. So basically, they are serving 6 different countries in Southeast Asia using these 3 separate warehouses. So why are they locating the warehouses in these 3 cities? I guess it's because of historical reason. And why are they using a dedicated strategy? So dedicated in the sense that, the Jakarta warehouse only serve the Indonesian market. The Manila warehouse only serve the Filipino markets, whereas the Kuala Lumpur warehouse only serve the Malaysia, Singapore, Taiwan, and Hong Kong. So the different warehouses, they don't help each other. They don't ship, for example, the Kuala Lumpur warehouse don't ship it to Indonesia. They only ship it to their dedicated zones, dedicated demand zone, and they don't help each other when the other warehouse is out of stock. So why do they do this? For historical reason, they adopt this dedicated strategy. So apparently, if you make the fulfillment network become more flexible, in the sense that, for example, when the Jakarta warehouse is out of stock, you might want to use inventory from Kuala Lumpur, or you may want to use the inventory from Manila. So we're trying to explore, what if we allow them to have this flexibility, how much saving, how much cost they can save, by using this, by leveraging this flexibility. So this is one of the objectives of this project. So essentially, we are looking at a supply chain for an e-commerce, for an online retailer in Southeast Asia. So we generalize the problems using this picture. So you can see that we are sourcing the goods from possibly multiple suppliers upstream, and then we store the inventory in the middle of the supply chain in different warehouses, and then finally we use the inventory to fulfill the demand in different zones. So you can think of these 3 different warehouses. Basically, one is Jakarta, one located in Kuala Lumpur, and then one located in Manila. Whereas the zones on the right here, these are different countries. You can think of the first one is, say, Malaysia, second one is Singapore, third one is Taiwan, and so on, right? So what is interesting about this company is that, for e-commerce, basically, when they do fulfillment, they only do fulfillments when they receive the order, right? So, for example, a customer in Malaysia, after they place the order, the company can decide, from which warehouse to fulfill this order. They can retrieve the item. In my model, the retailer can retrieve the items from a warehouse in Kuala Lumpur. You can also retrieve the inventory from Jakarta or Manila. So all these 3 different warehouses can serve the demands in a particular zone. Okay, but the demand is only fulfilled after the the demand is realized. We don't pre-order, we don't pre-ship the inventory. Okay, so as a result, we say the fulfillment is actually following a pull strategy, meaning that you only satisfy the demand after the demand is realized. So it's a pull strategy, or we call it a reactive strategy, right? Basically, you react to the demand. On the other hand, if you look at the upstream, when you look at the between the warehouse and suppliers, basically the supplier will only ship the products after the retailer place the order, and the retailer place the orders before they actually know the actual demand of these zones. So the replenishment, as well as the allocation to the warehouse, the allocation of the inventory to the warehouses are actually done before they know the actual demand. So that is why we say this is a push strategy. So when it comes to replenishing the products, as well as allocating the product to different warehouses, these 2 decisions are done in a push manner, meaning it's done in an anticipative manner, meaning that you don't actually know the actual demand, and you have to anticipate that how much to order from the supplier A, and then after that how much you're going to allocate it to warehouse 1, warehouse 2, warehouse 3, and so on. So these 2 decisions are anticipative, whereas the fulfillment decisions are reactive, in the sense that you only decide for the fulfillment after you know the actual demand. So if you look at these 2 different types of strategy, you can think of the warehouse form a natural boundary between the push and pull, right? So we call the warehouse as a push and pull boundary, and anything upstream basically is following an anticipative pull strategy, and anything downstream of the warehouse will be following the pull strategy or reactive strategy. So our idea here is to integrate these 2 strategies. Suppose the company are adopting these 2 strategies for different decisions, and how do you do optimizations by accommodating these 2 different kind of strategies. So that's our main problems to solve. So I conceptualize it using more academic setting and a supply chain model. So you can start to see notation now. Basically, the idea is we want to integrate the so-called anticipative replenishment and allocation decision together with the reactive fulfillment using the following model. Okay, so basically we are looking at a multi-period setting, a multi-period model. In each period, we need to decide how much inventory for each product, what is the order quantity that we should replenish from each supplier. So you can see on the left here, you have many suppliers. You have many suppliers. You have basically I suppliers. In total, you have I suppliers. And then in each period, I have to decide, for each product N, how much should I replenish it from supplier 1, how much I should replenish it from supplier 2, and so on. Okay, so these are very typical inventory kind of decision, very typical inventory model. Once you place the order, then the next question is you have to decide where you want to store this inventory, right? Suppose I order 100 units of product N from supplier I, and then how do I split these 100 units and store in different warehouses? So that's my next decision. So we use XNTI to represent the order quantity, and then we use V to represent the allocation quantity. Okay, so if suppose I orders 100 units from supplier I for product N, then I might allocate 50 units to warehouse fulfillment center 1. A fulfillment center is like a warehouse. We use 2 words interchangeably, and then I may allocate 30 units to warehouse 2, and then 20 units to warehouse 3, and so on. So the V here basically represent the allocation quantity. How much do I allocate from supplier I to fulfillment center J for product N in period T? All right. So I have explained 2 types of decision. One is a replenishment decision. The other is so-called the allocation decision. All right. So bear in mind that these two decisions are done in an anticipative manner before you know the actual demand of each period. Okay. Now, suppose I know the demand after, say at the end of the day, I know the actual demand of each zone. Then I also need to decide, from each warehouse, I need to retrieve how many units of product N to fulfill the demand of each zone. So in other words, I don't look at the demands at the order level. So basically, for example, for all the orders that I receive from Taiwan, basically I aggregate them. I just look at the aggregate demand of product N from Taiwan. Suppose the demand is 80 units, then I have to decide, from which warehouse I need to retrieve these 80 units, right? So I don't look at the demand at the order level, but instead I look at the aggregate level of the total demands of each zone. And a zone here corresponds to a country. All right. So my W here represents a WJK, represent how many units I retrieve from warehouse J to zone K for product N in period T. Okay. So these are my retrieval decisions, and these are my fulfillment decision. And this fulfillment decision is made after I know the actual demand of each zone at the end of the day. All right. And you can see that I have two terms here. One is a so-called online retailing channel. The other is so-called drop shipping channel on top of the figures here. So what do you mean by drop shipping? In case all my fulfillment centers are out of stock. Suppose the total demands of Taiwan for product N is 20 units for Tuesday, but turns out that I don't have any units of this product N from any of my fulfillment center. In that case, I can actually request for drop shipping. I can ask my supplier to ship directly to Taiwan with a higher cost, with a significantly higher cost. So we call this drop shipping, and we allow these to happen. So you can see that there are these dash arrows here representing drop shipping straight from the supplier. Okay. All right. So we basically assume that the drop shipping cost is significantly larger than those units that go through the normal channel, because basically when you request for drop shipping, then the supplier will need to expedite for you, and then production will be more expensive, the shipping will be more expensive, everything will be more expensive. So as a result, we try to avoid drop shippings as much as possible. As you can see here, drop shipping play a big role in determining our decisions. The cost of drop shipping play a big role in affecting our decisions. Okay, so let me try to summarize in my next slides about the decisions that we make. Right. So in every period T, I'm going to make replenishment decisions, meaning how many units shall I replenish from each supplier for product N. First of all, I need to decide whether I should replenish, right? Shall I replenish a product from a supplier? And if so, what is the quantity, right? And then after that, I have to decide how to allocate the inventory to the fulfillment centers, right? How do I split the goods and store in different fulfillment centers? And then finally, after the demand is known for each period, then how do I retrieve? Which fulfillment center shall I retrieve the product to fulfill the demand, right? So if you look at each period T, at the beginning, we assume that at the beginning of a period, we have to make two decisions: replenishment, which is my X representing the order quantity, and then the allocations, which is my V represent the allocation quantity. So these two decision variables must be decided before the actual demand happen in each period, meaning at the beginning of period T. So that's why the arrows here point to the beginning of period T. Now, let's say I wait until the end of the period. Let's say Tuesday. Today is Tuesday. At the end of Tuesday, I know the actual demand of every zone of Tuesday. Now I know that all the demand is realized. Then I have to make the fulfillment decision, which is my W. So the W must be only can be decided after I know the actual demands of the day. All right. So these are the three decisions, and the challenge of this problem is that we are mixing, we are integrating the anticipative anticipative decision together with the reactive decisions. The anticipated decision is actually made before you know the actual demand of Tuesday, whereas the reactive decision is made after you know the actual demand of Tuesday. And we are going to make this decision, these two types of decisions every day, you know, from Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and so on. So, you know, how do you do it in a efficient manner, in a way that, you know, you are making these two types of decision, namely, you know, anticipative decision together, you know, followed by the reactive decisions in a so-called convoluted way, you know, from period to period, from day to day, right? And each period in our model here, you can imagine that each period is 1 day. You can think of, you know, period 1 is Monday, period 2 is Tuesday, and so on. And the big T represent the length of planning horizon. And typically we set our the planning horizon to be 1 week. So typically we do the planning for 1 week. It's a weekly planning. Okay, so T equals to 6 or 7 for the company, right? The big T. All right, so basically you can put all these decisions together in a big model. So, you know, let's make things simple. Assumes that, you know, the demand is deterministic. Then I guess many of you, including our students, you know, even including our undergraduate students, they can write down this model, right? This supply change model. There's nothing fancy here, you know. In the objective, we have different kind of costs. Our goal is to minimize the sum of all these costs, which includes the ordering cost. In the ordering cost, there are two portions. There's one portion which is a fixed ordering cost. You can see that there's a fixed cost S here, together with the decision variable delta. Delta is the binary decisions. It means that, you know, if I place an order from supplier I for product N at the beginning of period T, then delta will be equal to 1. In that case, you incur a fixed setup cost for me. Okay. On top of the fixed setup cost, I also have variable production cost. This variable production cost, you can think in terms of the, you know, the cost for each shirt, the cost for each units of apparel. So of course, apparently, you know, it depends on my order quantity. The more I order, the more cost I have to pay, right? The more variable cost it incurs. So I have two types of ordering costs, one fixed ordering cost, which result in a binary variable, whereas I also have a variable production cost, you know, affected in the determined by my order quantity, X. And then on top of that, I have holding costs. When I keep my products in the fulfillment center, when I have inventory, I have the inventory holding cost. And then on top of that, I also have allocation cost. This allocation cost is basically the transportation cost that I ship, you know, from supplier. You know, when I ship from supplier to my fulfillment center, I actually need to pay for the transportation cost. So this is my allocation cost. A here represent the unit allocation cost, meaning how much it incurs when you ship 1 unit of products to each fulfillment center from each supplier, right? And, you know, by multiplying this quantity, then you get the total transportation cost. The last term is the fulfillment cost. So this fulfillment cost basically is a transportation cost that you ship the product from the fulfillment center to the demand zone, right? So when you ship from, say, Manila to Taiwan versus Kuala Lumpur to Taiwan, the cost can be different. So that's why we need to account for different fulfillment center as well as different zone. And we use the F. We use F to represent the unit fulfillment cost for each product, to ship each unit of product N from fulfillment center J to zone K for each period T, right? And then, so basically my objective is to minimize the total cost of all these different type of costs. And regarding constraint, I have different kind of constraint. You know, I have this production capacity constraint, meaning that, you know, my total production quantity, my total ordering quantity should not exceed the capacity limit of each supplier. So the total number of units that I order from supplier I for each period should not exceed the capacity of the supplier in that period. So I have X bar here to represent the capacity of supplier I in period T. And then, you know, after I receive the goods, we also consider a lead time. Okay, So it actually incurs, you actually have some finite lead time to ship the goods from supplier to your fulfillment center. So we need to account for lead time. And then this quantity is basically the order quantity that I place, like L, lead some number of lead times ago. So that will arrive today. And then that quantity, when I receive that quantity, I have to allocate to different warehouse. The sum of my V is the order quantity, the allocation quantity. So this is my V. So the sum of this V, it should be equal to the amount that I receive from the supplier. So that's why I have the second constraint, which is sum over order, sum over order fulfillment center. For order V, it should be equal to the amount that I receive from supplier I, right? And then on top of that, I also have a warehouse capacity constraint. The warehouse has, has limited space, so you cannot squeeze infinite amount of inventory to the warehouse. So I need to make sure that, the inventory in the warehouse at a particular time period should not exceed the size of the warehouse, right? And the next constraint is about fulfillment constraint. In every period, the total amount that I retrieve from different fulfillment centers should equal the demand of the zone. The total amount that I ship to that zone should be equal to the demand of that zone for product N. And then, of course, I need to also keep track of the, the inventory balance constraint, right? I need to make sure that the inventory is updated correctly. The inventory of warehouse, the inventory of fulfillment center J, the initial inventory plus whatever you put into that fulfillment center minus the quantity that you retrieve from that fulfillment center will be equal to the new inventory level for the next period, right? So if you look at all these decision variable, you realize that basically for simplicity, we assume the allocation quantity V, W, as well as Y, the inventory level. All these we assume they are continuous variable. Just to make things simple. In real life, of course, the units of products are discrete, right? They are integer, but just to make things simple, we assume they are continuous. And then what is troublesome here is that there is a binary decision, which is my delta. So delta only takes the value of 0 and 1 here. Okay. So because of this delta, which is a binary variable, it makes these problems more complicated. Now this is not just simple linear program, but instead it's a mixed integer program. It's a mixed binary program. And then of course in real life, our life is not so simple, right? Because demand is not deterministic. So when the demand is not deterministic, we have to model the demand. We have to, model the demand as a stochastic parameters, all right? So how do we model that? We have to move from a deterministic model to a stochastic model. All right, so we assume that our decision, all the decision variable now, is a functions of my random demand, okay? So for example, this X, which is the order quantity, is now a functions of random demand D. Okay, my D theta is my random demand, right? And same for my delta. So delta is it's a binary function, it's a binary variable function, and it's a functions of D as well, right? And delta equals 1 if my X is greater than 0. Otherwise, delta equals 0. If I order something from supply I, then delta equals 1, right? And then for my V, again, it's also a function of D. W is also a function of D. But what is different here is that, for X, which is the order quantity, the replenishment quantity, and for V, which is allocation quantity, they are decided, this decision variable for period T is decided before you actually know the demand of period T. So in other words, we can only assume that X, when we make the decision for X, we only know the information of D up to period T minus 1. Okay. In other words, when we decide the replenishment quantity for period T, let's say for Wednesday, if I want to make the replenishment quantity for Wednesday, I only know the demand of Monday and Tuesday, right? So I only rely on the demand informations up to period T minus 1. So that is why I have a T minus 1 here. to indicate that, I only have information up to period t minus 1. So this applies to B as well. Okay, again, I have information up to period t minus 1. But then for W, because W is a reactive decision, we only know we only make the decision W after we know the actual demand of period t. So as a result, W is a function of demand up to period t. So W include the information of period t, whereas X and V only includes information up to period t minus 1. All right. How do we do with time, Sandeep?
So yeah, we are doing well. So we are about 35 minutes into the talk. And I didn't interrupt you because we don't seem to have any clarification questions from the participants. I think all of this is very clear. So you can go ahead. So we don't have a question. If there is a pressing question, I may just
interrupt me. Yeah, interrupt me.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Thank you.
All right. So basically, by assuming these decision as a functions of random parameter d, so you can think of these as parameterized function, right? So I'm going to substitute this parameterized function, these random functions, to my model, my previous model. Then I end up with this stochastic model. So I have a stochastic model, and in this stochastic model, my decisions are all random function. You can see it's a function of random variable, right? My X is a function of random variable. My V also function of random variable, etc. Okay, everything is the same. The constraint, all the constraint, and including the objective. This objective phi here, psi here, basically is a notation for my previous total cost. Basically, you can imagine psi is this whole summation. Okay, these are whole summations of different variables, different costs. Okay, so in this stochastic model, I'm trying to minimize expected cost. So the expected total cost, my objective is to minimize expected total cost subject to all these constraints. And now my constraints become stochastic constraint because the decision variable are all stochastic function. They are all functions of random variable. And the random variables here are our demands, demands of different zones in different period for different product, right? Okay, so how do we solve this problem? The question is, how do we solve this problem? It becomes very complicated. Basically, this is a very standard, a very typical stochastic optimization problem. You can use stochastic programming to solve it. You can use different kind of stochastic optimization method, the state-of-the-art stochastic optimization method to solve it. You can use dynamic programming also. But you realize that because of the scales of these problems, you realize many of these state-of-the-art, many of the standard approach will break down because the problem is just too big for them. So if you're using, for example, dynamic programs, I can't even solve a problem with 3 products. When I solve a problem with 3 products, the dynamic program will just blow up immediately. So as a result, we are going to propose a heuristic to solve this. When I say heuristics, basically is a heuristic approach. And this approach consists of 2 phases. That's why we call it a 2-phase approach. Okay? In phase 1, okay, we are trying to basically solve an optimization problem. And these optimization problems are with a goal. The goal here is to absorb. The goal in phase 1 is to absorb as much demand uncertainty as possible. So I'm trying to absorb, as much uncertainty as possible when I do the planning for phase 1. All right, I'll tell you what I mean by demand uncertainty. What do you mean by absorb as much as possible of this uncertainty in a short while? And then our method is basically we're going to use a so-called target-oriented robust optimization approach to solve this problem. We'll approximate the PS. PS is our stochastic model, which is the gigantic model that I showed you just now. This PS. This is my PS. It's a stochastic model. So basically, we'll approximate this stochastic model using a mixed integer program. Okay, I'm going to approximate using a mixed integer program, and then I'm going to solve these using a target-oriented robust optimization approach, right? And the output of my phase one is the binary replenishment decisions. In other words, I want to decide the delta first. Remember that delta is my binary decisions in my stochastic model. So delta here, delta is my binary decision. So I want to fix delta first in phase one, right? So my main target is to optimize my delta in phase one. Then I will pass this delta to phase two. Okay. So when I solve in phase two, when I solve the problem, I assume delta does not change. Okay, I will fix delta in phase two. As a result, in phase two, I get rid of the binary variable. So in phase two, I don't have binary variable anymore. So as you can see, basically our goal here in phase two is to minimize the worst case expected total cost. We are trying to minimize the worst case expected cost, and then we approximate again the PS, which is my stochastic problem, using a linear program. Okay, we approximate using a linear program, and then we solve it using a linear decision rule approach. Okay, I will explain to you what do you mean by linear decision rule later. And then the output of phase two is to decide the replenishment, allocation, and fulfillment quantities. Okay, so let me recap. Basically, we split the problem we solve the problem in two phases. In phase one, we are only determining the binary decision, binary replenishment decision, meaning that, for example, should we order product N from supplier 1 on Monday? Okay. Should we order product N prime from supplier 3 on Wednesday, and so on? Okay, it's a binary decision, right? We don't have to worry about the order quantity yet. Okay. Once I decide this delta, then I pass it to phase two. So meaning that, if let's say the delta is, let's say, the delta have already determined, and we have already decided that, let's say I will order product N from supplier 1 on Monday, then in that case, delta equals 1 for, the delta for that particular arts will be equals to 1. So it means that I must order something, I need to order something from supplier 1 for product N. And in phase two, exactly how much should I order? Basically, I'll decide in phase two. I'll determine the actual replenishment quantity in phase two, together with the allocation as well as the fulfillment quantity. So as you can see, I guess many of you now, you may realize it now, why we split into two phases, because in that case, by doing this, basically we can split the binary decision from the continuous decision. So we can decouple the binary decision from a continuous decision. In the first phase, we handle the binary decision. In second phase, we only handle the continuous decision. So because of that, it make our approach much more scalable, and as a result, we can use it to solve real size problem. So I will show you a case study with a company, and you can see that how our approach can be scale up to solve an almost realistic size problem. Okay. All right. I saw somebody raise hands. Shall we stop here, or shall I continue?
Yeah, sure. We can take this question. So Chandrasekhar asks whether this model considers minimum quantity in fulfillment center.
Minimum quantity fulfillment. No, if the demands of each zone is 0 for that particular day, then we don't fulfill. Is that what you're asking?
So Chandrasekhar, can you please type whether your question has been clarified or not?
I'm looking at it. What do you mean by minimum quantity? Oh, minimum quantity in fulfillment center. I see. No. The quantity in fulfillment center can be 0. There is no lower bound. But there is an upper bound because the warehouse size is limited, right? So we consider upper bound for the warehouse, but we the lowest inventory level can be 0. All right.
Okay.
So this is the basic. So this is the basic
in terms of time,
of
we
our
have.
approach.
Sorry for. In terms of time, we have about 15 minutes.
Okay, sure. Let me let me quickly finish the methodology. Then I show you the result. So in phase 1, basically we use a target-oriented robust optimization model. The idea is basically we assume that the demands fall in a demand support set. Okay, so in this demand support set, I have a mean. I assume that demand support set center at basically the middle is centered at a mean, and then I have a lower bound and an upper bound of the demand. So my demand can fall in any point within this interval. And then instead of considering the original demand support set, we want to say, hey, maybe we should consider a so-called adjustable uncertainty set. Okay, what do you mean by adjustable? In the sense that instead of considering the original lower and upper bound, I make the lower bound and upper bound adjustable, okay, by using a parameter called gamma. Okay, so this gamma is an adjustable parameter. When gamma is big, then basically my size, the size of this support set, my size of this uncertainty set is bigger. When gamma is small, then the size becomes smaller. Okay, so I can use gamma to adjust the size of my uncertainty set. So when gamma is 1, then I end up with the original uncertainty set. When gamma equals 0, then I end up with a mean value. All right. So in this so-called TRO formulation, the target-oriented robust optimizations formulations, let us first look at a constraint here. Okay. So in this constraint, this psi here is our old friend. This psi is my objective. It's my total cost. Okay. So I put the total cost in the constraint now, and I require my total cost to be below certain cost budget, phi. Okay, so phi is my budget, meaning that I want to make sure that the total cost is below phi. It cannot be higher than let's say $5,000, for the planning horizon. And all the constraints will still remain. And then on top of that, I have this gamma, which is a continuous variable between 0 and 1. And you see, my objective here is try to maximize my gamma. It means that in this formulation, instead of minimizing the cost directly, I instead try to maximize the uncertainty. Okay, try to maximize uncertainty that I can absorb. So I try to maximize by gamma. In other words, I try to maximize the size of my adjustable uncertainties. I need to make sure that if I choose a value gamma, then I need to make sure that for any demand realization that fall in this adjustable uncertainty set, I want to make sure that these total costs should not exceed my budget. Okay, the budget is phi, is a parameter that have to be predetermined. Okay, we have to preset the value of phi. So let's say phi is $5,000. It means that for example, your supervisor tell you that you cannot spend more than $5,000 for this supply chain planning for the whole week. Okay, so basically you cannot exceed this $5,000. So our idea here is basically we want to make sure that our total cost do not exceed this 5,000 limit, 5,000 budget, and at the same time we try to maximize the size of the uncertainty set. In other words, we try to maximize we try to absorb as much uncertainty as possible. Okay, when we come up with our decision. Bear in mind that we also include when we solve this model, we also determine the order, the delta and so on, order quantity, V, W, and so on, beside this gamma. So in this in next page, basically we basically formulate on the problem for online retailers as follows, and we need to relax one constraint. Okay, instead of of this equality constraint, we need to relax it to inequality. Otherwise, we cannot handle that. So we relax equality to inequality, and then the rest stay the same. So we are solving this problem, and we can prove that we are solving this first problem. We're solving the first problem here, and then we can prove that by considering some simple policies, simple decision policy, as well as the worst case scenario of the demand, the worst case demand value, which is highlighted here. Turns out that, by simply considering a very simple static policy, as well as the worst case value of the demand, we end up with this mixed integer program. Okay, so this is a mixed integer program, and by solving this mixed integer program optimally, we can prove that the optimal solution is equivalent to the optimal solution of this original stochastic problem. So this is a magic. The trick for this approach is here. Basically, we don't have to solve these robust problems in a very complicated manner, because all these demand here, bear in mind that my demand, I need to make sure that all these constraints must be satisfied for all demand realizations in the uncertainty set. So this is a very complicated optimization problem, but we managed to prove that by considering the worst case scenario of the demand, as well as a simple policy for each variable, we are able to we are able to prove that by solving this simpler model, the optimal solution, the solution is still optimal for the original formulation. Okay, so instead of solving a stochastic model or a robust model, we solve a static model, which is a mixed integer program. Okay, so in phase one, essentially we are solving a mixed integer program, and then we determine this delta. We find this delta, and then we pass it to phase two, right? So in phase two, as I told you, we use linear decision rule to model the decision variable in phase two. So we basically assume that each decision variable is a linear function. It's the affine functions of the random demand. So my random demand here, these are random parameters. So I assume all these decisions are linear functions of these random parameters. Okay, and the coefficients of these linear functions basically is something that we need to determine. Okay, we will find these coefficients in the following model. Okay, so the idea is by assuming these linear functions of decision, then I plug in this linear function into the stochastic model that I showed you earlier. And so basically I end up with I plug into this stochastic model, I plug the linear function into this stochastic model, and then by comparing the left hand side and right hand side on the coefficients, I managed to able to match these coefficients, ensuring that they are identical and so on. And eventually I'm able to convert everything to a linear program. Okay, I will be able to convert this into a linear program, and finally I solve the linear program. And what do I solve in the linear program? The decision variable in the linear program is basically the coefficient. It's the coefficients of this linear function, right? So in the phase two, my goal is to determine these coefficients, which are continuous variable. And then once I know all these coefficients, I can just simply wait until the demand in each period is realized. Once they're realized, I can just plug it in to this function, then I will know the decisions for each period. The decision of X, V, and W, which is a quantity, order quantity, allocation quantity, and fulfillment quantity in each period as the demands unfold over time. Okay, so this X, V, and W can be determined as the demands unfold if I know the coefficients of all these linear functions. So basically I determine these coefficients through solving a linear program in these slides. Okay, so basically I convert this stochastic program into a linear program, and finally I solve this linear program to find out those coefficients. Okay, so next I'm going to present, so these are basically the basic idea of this two-phase approach, and I'm going to compare this two-phase approach with some standard approach. So we first look at a very small problem. We only have 3 products, and then consider 2 suppliers, 2 fulfillment center, and 2 demand zone. And we can actually find a lower bound. Basically, we can construct a lower bound by considering, perfect information, right? Assuming all the demand is given, and then we can solve for these problems in a deterministic way. And assuming we know the actual demand, then we can find the optimal planning. So that should be the lower bound. You give you the lowest cost. On top of that, we benchmark our approach with 3 other existing approaches from a literature. All these literature published not long ago. The first one is so-called binary decision rule. Second is a finite adaptability, and then the third one is a non-adaptive binary decision. Okay, essentially all these three approaches, they solve the decision variable, the binary decision, and continuous decision in a single model. Whereas we decouple the binary from the continuous decision and solve them in two phases. Okay, so in this table you can see that it shows you the cost, the total costs are given by each approach. And our approach, we also can compare our cost with the lower bound to determine the gap, to determine the gap. So the smaller, the better for the gap. Okay. So if you look at this red number, we can see that the gap of our approach is actually smaller than the approach, the FA approach, finite adaptability approach, and also the binary decision rule. Okay. And then our gap is slightly bigger than the non-adaptive binary decision. Why is that so? Because the non-adaptive binary decision, they are solving the binary decision as well as the continuous decision simultaneously. So they do a joint optimization. So that's why their quality, the solution quality is better. So if you look at others instances, when you consider 6 periods or 8 periods in the planning horizon, or even 10 periods, you basically observe that our approach consistently beating the BDR as well as the FA approach. But we are slightly worse than the MBD approach. But in terms of computational time, our computation time is much shorter compared to an MBD approach. And then we can show in the larger instances that the MBD approach will be quickly blow up as the size of problems increases. So the MBD approach is also not scalable. Turns out that only our approach is scalable in our numerical experiments. Okay, so you can see from this numerical study, you can see that our approach not only give a lower cost compared to BDR and FA, and our computation time is also much shorter. Okay, so it's a very scalable approach. And what we learn here is that we obtain some technical insight here is that by decoupling the binary decision from a continuous decisions, basically we yield high quality solutions that preserve some tractability. Okay, so on one hand we want to ensure the quality of a solution is good, but on the other hand we want to make the approach tractable. So it seems that our approach, the two-phase approach, is able to achieve both. And then we also look at larger instances. When we increase the problem size, all these three methods cannot, basically they'll blow up. Okay, they cannot solve even for 10 products or beyond. Okay, all right, so let's look at larger problems. When we look at larger problems, we have to compare with other heuristic. We consider two different heuristic. One is DCA, which stand for basically this heuristic decouple the replenishment decision from the rest, from the other decision. So we decide the replenishment quantity first, and then we solve the allocation fulfillment quantities later. Okay, we decouple these two layers of decisions in two different models. And then the DET basically is a deterministic model. We solve a deterministic model using the mean demands. Okay, this is the simplest method. It's basically the first model that I present using deterministic demand. So in this table, you can see that again, the gap from the lower bound, our approach give very low gap, very small gap, okay, which is only about 6%. And if you look at DCA, the gap is much larger. Is at least 36%. Okay, 36% from the lower bound. And then DET is also the gap is also quite big, 21%. So again, our approach give very small gap compared to a lower bound, and is significantly smaller than the gap by the other two heuristics. So the lesson that we learn here is that by integrating the decisions, because we're integrating the replenishments and allocation and fulfillment decision in one model, so compared to DCA, we outperform DCA significantly. So that shows the value of integrations. And then compared to DET, because DET only consider deterministic demand, so our model we also consider robustness, as well as adaptability. We allow a decision variable to be adaptable. So you realize that by considering robustness and adaptability, you actually give extra value. As you can see here, when we compare TPA with the two-phase approach with the DET approach. All right. So finally, let me present the case study very quickly. So in this case study, we obtain the data from a company. And then in this case study, there's only one supplier located in Guangzhou. There are 3 fulfillment centers and 6 zones in Southeast Asia. In total, they have 10,000 products. So this is, if you plot the cumulative, the demand, the total sales of all the product, you can see that, the demand of the product is very skewed, meaning that, most of the activity actually concentrate in a very, concentrate in the top few products, of their assortment. Okay. So most of the demands happen in the top 1,000 products. Okay. And then these are the demands, these are the sales happen in across different countries. In the central figure shows you, the sales of different countries. And the third one just showing the autocorrelations of demand. Okay. All right. Then basically we in our approach, we need to do some forecasting. We need to forecast, remember, in the support set, we need to know the mean demand as well as the lower bound and upper bound of the demand. So we have to do some forecasting. So these 2 graphs just to give you some sense of how do we do the forecasting. We need to forecast upper bound of demand as well as the lower bound and also the mean demand for Hong Kong and Singapore in this diagram. Okay. So by using this mean value as well as the upper bound and lower bound, we plug this value into our model, then we can solve this model. Okay, then these charts basically, this graph shows the performance of each policy. Our TPA approach, this two-phase approach is the lowest, is the bottom line. It gives you the lowest cumulative cost. The horizontal axis is time in terms of week, and then the vertical axis shows you the cumulative cost. So you can see that our approach gives the lowest cumulative cost, and followed by SQM. So what's SQM? Basically, the retailer, the online retailer currently using the dedicated approach, right? Dedicated strategy, meaning each fulfillment center only serve a subset of zones, and then at the same time, so basically we call this status quo fulfillment strategy, meaning that their strategies is dedicated. Like for example, the Jakarta warehouse only serve the Indonesian market, and then the Manila warehouse only serve the Filipinos market. So basically, this is what we call the status quo fulfillment. And then on top of that, we consider what if throughout these 25 weeks of periods, 25 weeks of time, the retailer only do 1 replenishment. Okay, assuming they only optimize and do 1 replenishment, which is at the beginning of the planning of this planning horizon or this planning period. We call this SQS policy. Okay, meaning status quo single replenishment. Okay. On top of that, we also consider what if they use the same dedicated fulfillment network, the status quo fulfillment network. Basically, we make the replenishment more flexible. Instead of having 1 single replenishment, you can have multiple replenishment. So we allow the retailer to optimize the replenishment. We call this SQM. Okay. Turns out SQM is number 2. The cost is second lowest. SQM cost is second lowest. And then the rest, if you look at other heuristics such as DCA, the decomposition method, the DET method, the deterministic method, as well as SQS method, they are all significantly higher than our approach. Okay, so it turns out our approach can give you 10% saving compared to SQM. If you compare to SQM, which is the second lowest curve, our approach gives you 10% saving overall. And then if you compare with SQS, which is what the status quo policy, which is a policy currently adopted by the company, we can actually help them to save 30% of the cost, okay, which is quite significant. All right. And furthermore, we basically solve this problem up to 1,000 products. So our method can be scaled up to 1,000 products over a supply chain of 1 supplier, 3 warehouses, and 6 zones over 7 periods, right? All right, to conclude, basically, this is my last slide. Basically, we propose a two-phase approach to solve the online retailing problem for the supply chain planning problem for online retailer. In this two-phase approach, basically in phase 1, we determine the binary decision, and then in phase 2, we determine the continuous decision, which are the order quantity, allocation quantity, and fulfillment quantities. And the nice thing about our approach is that, we only need the mean as well as the bounds of the demands. So we don't even need to assume the distributions of the demand. So we don't need the distribution, we don't need these informations. And then what we obtain, the insight that we learn from this study is that, by decoupling the binary decision from a continuous decision, you actually can produce very high quality solution, and at the same time, you preserve the tractability. You make the approach tractable. And then we also learned that, by integrating the integration, robustness, and adaptability of the decisions actually create significant values when compared to those heuristics that neglect these features. And then finally, we also observe that by solving the TR model, meaning that by considering using the target-oriented robust optimization, meaning we try to absorb as much uncertainty as possible in phase 1. Turns out the results is significantly better as compared to other approach in phase 1. They actually make more effective binary decisions. And then in our case study, we shows that we can save up to 30% of the cost of the retailer's status quo policy. Okay. And then finally, we realize that in our approach, we actually have a parameter phi. So somebody may ask, how do we choose the value of phi, which is a budget, right? How do we set a budget? We actually observe some trends for this phi. We realize that, when the dropshipping costs are large, or when your setup costs are very large, then we should choose a large budget. Okay. And when the demands are small, when the demand are very small, again, we should choose a large budget as well. So generally, by choosing a large budget under these 3 situations, it gives us a better result. Okay, so this is what we observe. All right, I will stop here, and I'll be happy to take questions from now on. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Professor Lim. So this was wonderful. We have a few questions. So Nitin asks, he has a question, I think, about uncertainty. I'm guessing he's asking about demand uncertainty and whether demand uncertainty is determined on the basis of historical sales.
Okay, the uncertainty is determined on what?
Whether the uncertainty is determined based on historical sales.
Okay. Basically, we are looking at a multi-period setting, right? If you look at this diagram, so we're looking at a multi-period setting. In every period, at the beginning of a period, I do not know the demand of period T yet. So the uncertain demand of period T is unknown in period T. It's unknown at the beginning of period T. So I only know the demand up to period T minus 1. Okay? So when I'm Tuesday, let's say I'm on Tuesday, on Tuesday morning, I only know the demand of Monday. Okay? When I'm on Wednesday morning, I only know the demands of Monday and Tuesday. So the uncertainty is only known up to period T minus 1 when I'm at the beginning of period T. But if I'm at the end of period T, then I also know my information also includes the actual demand of period T. Am I answering the questions?
So Nitin, it would be nice if you, okay, yeah. So Nitin says, thanks. So I think that's addressed. The other question from, so Jyotsna has a question, and she asks how we are, in this model, how are new products taken into account that face the cold start problem?
Okay. Good questions. Basically, because our model is pretty general, it's a multi-period model, multi-period, multi-products model. So when you consider when you have new products, and when you take this new product into account when you do the planning, you can always start from scratch. Because our planning horizon typically is 1 week. So basically, I plan for 1 week. For example, I start from Monday morning. On Monday morning, I start to plan for my decision for Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, all the way to Saturday, right? For the whole week, or all the way to Sunday, right? For the whole week. And then for the next Monday morning, I have to resolve the problem again. So every time when I solve this problem, I only solve for 1 week. I only solve for the decision for 1 week. When I move to next week, I have to resolve again. So when I have new products coming in next week, then I will just simply take those new products into account when I do the planning for next week. Yeah.
Okay, wonderful. So maybe we can take one last question. And in this question, KP asks whether there are other alternatives or alternative approaches or methods or algorithms for solving similar problems.
Alternative. Okay, there are many alternatives. So I show you a couple of, because this is a stochastic optimization problem with, so on this slide, you can see this is a stochastic optimization problem with binary decision variable. So there are some papers, essentially you are solving a stochastic mixed integer program, right? Or a mixed integer program with stochastic parameters. So there are many papers discussing how to solve this, but this field is still very primitive. So people are still trying to figure out how to do this efficiently. So these are the 3 papers, for example. These are the 3 alternative methods to solve this set of stochastic mixed integer programs. But I can tell you that from our experiments, we have tried many different instances through many experiments. We realize that these 3 approaches they cannot scale, meaning that they cannot solve a realistic size problem. They only solve very small instance. For example, 3 product. When you move to 10 product, 100 product, they just blow up, and they cannot give you any answer. So that is why our approach is promising. And on top of that, we also propose 2 heuristics. So these 2 heuristics is also proposed by us, the DCA and DET. These are heuristics, and apparently the quality of the solutions, or the quality of the solution given by these heuristics are not as good compared to our 2-phase approach. So all these are the approaches that we consider solving to solve this problem. Yep.
Okay, I think we are, thanks Professor Lim for this.
Sure, my pleasure.
Talk. I'm sure the participants have learned a lot and gained a lot from attending your talk. So thanks so much. It's been a pleasure and a delight to have you with us.